Let's start. Hello, everybody. Welcome to a program called Distinct Order, and we are hearing panel number 2, Content. This program is in partnership with British Council and curated by Roopesh. My name is Ghazil Al-Qudsi. I am an Arab Singaporean filmmaker currently based in Singapore. I am 182 cm tall, and I'm a little bit towards the obese side. Let me try to begin with this session with a short description before I introduce our panelists. The exploration for the medium of film started with the curiosity of galloping, which later revealed a new universe of motion through photography. The galloping horse became one of Muybridge's greatest achievements that has led us to the discovery of capturing time or cinema. At this present time, 143 years after Muybridge's achievement, we can see the rapid evolution of cinema, both in speed and length. Curiosity has led to the discovery of novelty shows and now into a full-blown entertainment industry. A question I often ponder, are we moving too fast to meet the demands of commerce? Is there enough room for curiosity, exploration, research, playfulness, reflection, and critique? How do we nurture this generation of Georges Méliès, the French illusionist, actor, and film director, who has led many technical and narrative development in the earliest days of cinema? As part of this program, A Distinct Order, I'm interested to put forward a discussion on diversity in the possibilities offered by the medium, moving images. As cinema sanitizes its audience with the commerce take of moving images, I keep pondering on how creative practitioners can dissect or propose new distinct order as alternative consumption with new ideas or even critiques. This is to explore the plurality of S in cinema, to each his own cinema. Joining me in this discussion are 3 artists, filmmakers, whose work can be viewed as part of this showcase. You can take a look at Morgan's and Okilala's work as part of the showcase. And I would like to introduce you. We have Mahen Bala, Okilala, and Morgan Acquaintance. Allow me to just read a little bit of their bio. Mahen Bala is a Malaysian documentarian and visual artist who has worked on documenting Malaysian culture and history for more than a decade. His primary interest is in investigating the human experience and how memory shapes personal and communal construct of history. His latest book, Postcards from the South, is a comprehensive record of railway memory and history in Malaysia and Singapore. In 2020, he completed a fellowship with the Japan Foundation Asia Center and is currently pursuing his master's at the University of Malaya. Hello, Mahen. We have our second panelist, Okilala, is an artist and cultural worker based in Kuala Lumpur and Penang, Malaysia. Her practice spans from video, performance to public engagement. Oki's work explores themes of diaspora, home, and belonging through the performance of domestic acts or vocational labor, such as sewing, cooking, conversing, and building. Recent presentation includes shows at Singapore Biennale, Festival Tokyo, Yamaguchi Art Center for Arts and Media, Parasite, and National Art Gallery. Hello, Kui. And I'll introduce the last panelist, which is Morgan Acquaintance. Morgan is a London-based artist and writer. His moving image work has been shown and exhibit widely at festivals and institutions, including MoMA, New York, I have to pronounce this well, Miss Voy Foundation for the Arts, San Francisco, Kanstal, Sweden, David Dale, Glasgow, European Media Arts Festival, Germany, Alchemy Film and Arts Festival, Scotland, Image Festival, Toronto, International Film Festival, Rotterdam, and Third Horizon Film Festival, Miami. Hello, Morgan. You have a long list of festivals there. Hello, everyone. And we are accompanied by Jonah Ong, who will be helping us doing the translating for sign language. To begin this discussion, I would like to invite our speakers to introduce their work, their own curious world for their art practice with the medium of moving image. Maybe we can start with Mahen.
Thank you so much for the introduction, Ghazi. Yes. Hello to everyone. My name is Mahen Bala, and I'm a documentarian and visual artist. I'm a Malaysian of South Asian descent, and I'm wearing a dark blue shirt, and I just had a haircut, so my hair is all neat and tidy. I think in today's session, I'll be very much focusing on my own experience as a documentarian. Although I do work as a cinematographer in the film industry, but I'll be really focusing on how I use the medium of moving images as a way of remembering and also exploring marginalized spaces within Malaysia itself. So that will be very much my focus for today, I think.
Thank you so much, Mahen. How about Okwi?
Hi, I'm Okwi. I'm a Malaysian from Chinese descendants. I have a dark long hair, and I'm wearing, and I like to wear big round spectacles. I work with video, and I usually perform in it with my family, friends, or the small groups of people from the community around me. With that, I'm curious with my shifting identities of myself and the people around me, especially through the lens of a camera as well.
Thank you so much, Okwi. Can we move on to Morgan?
Hi, everybody. My name is Morgan Acquaintance. I was born in England, and I am of Afro-Caribbean descent. I don't know what else to say. I'm like 5'9" of average attractiveness, and you know, I think maybe that's about it. I've got a bit of a beard and my hair's pretty short, but it's not as tidy as Mahen's. And so my film practice, it's still to be determined, really. I'm not really sure what it is that I'm doing. Each time I make a film, I tend to discover something and explore it through the making of the film. But broadly speaking, I think you could divide my work into two categories: stuff that's to do with more abstract emotions and sets of conditions, and then a kind of modest documentary practice, which is focused on doing portraits of cities that try to run counter to maybe exploitative journalistic reports of places that are not Western capitals.
Audience, you may view Okwi's work and Morgan's work as part of the video showcase, and perhaps is it possible for Morgan and Okwi to share a little bit about the work that the audience might say?
I can go first. The work that I'm sharing is my language proficiency. It's basically me, 4 Okwis, speaking in 4 languages. One in English, Bahasa Malaysia, which is the national language in Malaysia, Mandarin, and Hokkien. This 4, I'm basically having a panel discussion with myself, and how I started to do that work was I had a question asked by my friend whether I am the same person when I'm speaking in a certain language or a different person. I don't know that, so I recorded it, and that was my language proficiency. And there's no subtitle there because all language is being translated by myself. Yeah. Thank you.
Thank you so much. How about you, Morgan?
Yeah, okay, so the film that's showing in the program is a film called Another Decade, and it's probably one of the most polemical films I've ever made, and it's essentially trying to, it's a collage of many different clips that puts forward an argument about a partial view of the 1990s in England. And it argues that there is another set of social, cultural, historical and economic events that should be considered rather than the ones that are considered as characteristic of the 1990s.
Thank you so much. Do catch their work. So let's begin our discussion. Every day we are facing a lot of mass consumption of moving images. The moment you switch on your laptop, the moment you switch on the TV, or even billboards everywhere are turning into moving images. So as we see moving images or even cinema age after 143 years, how do you see the content and technical possibilities of expanding the medium beyond mainstream entertainment or consumption? Yeah, and you can relate this to your own practice. Anybody would like to answer this?
I find it quite interesting that the way we use the word content today meant something completely different, say, 20 years ago. 20 years ago, I think before social media, moving images would essentially mean you're making a film. And that film could really mean either you're making a commercial film, or you're making a documentary, or you're making maybe an art film whom maybe only 10 people might ever see it ever. But now we have this term content, which seems to, it has become this umbrella term to just, categorize everything, anything and everything that is purposefully created for mass consumption. And I think it's interesting for us to note that we don't use the word content when we talk about documentaries. Documentary sort of exists in its own world where the term documentary carries its own intention. But content, at least in my mind, speaks directly to media that is created for mass consumption. And it almost carries this very, how do I put it? It colors the medium in a sense that things that are labeled as content are generally things that you consume mindlessly almost. And it's not something that you really need to pay attention to, or something that you would expect to be life-changing, or something that pushes your boundaries, like how we would consider art. So I just thought it would be interesting for us to just talk about this word, which is essentially the main single most important word that we have for the panel today, which is content. And I'm just very curious if the word content really means the same thing for everyone else, for you, Morgan, and for you, Okui.
Yeah. What about you, Morgan and Okui? The word content itself.
Do you want to go first, Okui?
You can go first.
Well, I think I try not to think about it. I feel like I've spent quite a long time in my life trying to get to a point where I was lucky enough to be able to work with a camera or have people consider what I do with like a degree of seriousness. That now that I'm here, I'm not really concerned with this other stuff that's happening. And I was thinking about this in relation to discussing what I do as working with moving images. And I think what I realized just through listening to other people just today was that it is basically a choice of deciding that the best way that I feel I can try to connect with other people or to explore ideas that feelings, emotions, or sociocultural events that mean something to me, or I suspect may mean something to others. The best way I can explore those is through images that move. It feels to me that they're the most, okay, we could say, we can use maybe a slightly negative term, they're the most coercive form of expression I have to hand. It might be different if I was a painter, you know, maybe, you know, or if I was a better musician, you know, but I just feel like images are the best, and images that move are the most, almost, you know, democratic is another contested term, but it feels like, you know, there's not so much of a barrier. But that does tend to, but also it means that there's a lot of complexity sometimes in what I do. And that tends to mean that people really don't view what I do in the same light as maybe mass consumed stuff. In the same, when I was watching Okwi's film, you know, straight away I thought this is kind of, I felt that was doing a similar thing. Yeah, I don't want to talk for Okwi there, so.
Yeah, after hearing from Morgan, I was thinking that when do I first encounter the word content? I mean, as a multimedia student, when we deal with the word content, it was the medium we have plus a topic, which is usually an issue. But for myself, when I start to make my first video work, I engaged my mother and we sewed together. So for me, I just want to do a performance with me and my mom. But later on, I also learned through this vocabulary that people gave to me that, that you are talking about a Malaysian Chinese identity. This is intergenerational. And I slowly picked up this term. Although I started off with the idea of working with people around me, even the migrant communities around my neighborhood. And then there comes the words that comes in of, you're working with the migrants' roots, migrants' identities. So this is how I got introduced and work on more and more on this contents or maybe categorizations. So yeah. How about you, Mahen?
Yeah.
I first started with moving images as a way of remembering. I grew up on the East Coast, and over time I saw a lot of changes happening to the landscape around me. And for some reason, I think it's for a reason that I'm still discovering in the works that I do, I felt this desperate need to just document everything, even if there was no particular issue that I'm talking about, or I'm not forefronting any particular cause with these films, or even a narrative or a conflict. I just felt this immediate need that I need to record all of these pictures and keep them for posterity. And for some reason, I felt that still images were not enough to provide context as to how it felt to be within an environment. And so that, I think, has sort of, it's something that I find consistent throughout my works, where I try to use moving images as a way of providing experiential context. So if I'm talking about one particular subject, it's not enough for me to just picture the subject alone. I need to showcase what it feels to be within that environment. So that is something that draws, that I'm really drawn with the moving images, I think, as a medium. And I think on the question of content and technical possibilities, I think one of the great things to happen is that any one of us can essentially just go out there, have ease of access to equipment and just start creating. I think that's one of the greatest things to happen, like in the last few decades. It has opened up so much. And I think to a certain extent, perhaps without that ease of access, I don't think any one of us here would have been able to create the works that we have.
That's very interesting. And I think that, this easy accessibility has created a lot of, I would say, content as in data for the future. And I always see that the camera not just as a recorder, but also as a projector. And I think, what is your view on that in regards to your work? Especially Mahen, who has been doing a lot of documentation of your own, trying to recall things.
I think when I first started out documenting things, I did not create it with the idea of having an audience. I never had that in mind. For some reason, just recording all of these things and keeping them in tapes gave me that sense of comfort. Although I would realize later on that there was this danger of losing everything because of the limitations with technology. And then when there was an opportunity to essentially transfer all of these images onto an online platform, that of course liberated the works in a sense. But then that also created this problem that I think you reminded us earlier about how there is just so much content. There's such an abundance of content out there, abundance of video works that everything almost feels like the same. Everything just becomes essentially content. But I think it also provides a bit of space for people to discover the contents that they are drawn towards, or the content that they are looking for on their own accord. So that I think has really opened up an opportunity for people to really discover and rediscover things. So I find it very interesting that if you remember how we used to watch films back then, we could only watch it in a cinema. So, you would wait for the film to come up and then to start showing in the cinema, and then you go and watch it, and then it's over. That experience cannot be relived. But that has changed tremendously. I mean, today it's very easy to just go back and watch films from the distant past. And you can even go further and discover films from the archives, right from the very starting point of the creation of this medium itself. So I think that has created a lot of opportunities, but also a lot of problems as well, where one person can be inundated with the options of it can become very overwhelming, I feel.
Maybe I would like to hear also from my end, what do you think about the disadvantages of all this? You did mention about that. Yeah.
I think one of the things that I'm encountering today is that at least I hear many really young people who feel that they need to speed through life, as in they need to watch moving images at a much quicker pace than that was intended by the filmmakers themselves. So I've heard many instances of people actually watching films by speeding it up, and sometimes just scrubbing through. I think that is just one of the disadvantages that we have in the current landscape. I'm sure the others would have their own opinions as well.
Yes, perhaps Oki and Morgan, I'm very impressed by the work you've made, which are very important. There are I think issues that need to be documented. Perhaps you may want to say about the idea of how the camera itself is no longer a recording device; it becomes a projector.
When I saw, the term camera as a projector, I think it's it was in my mind that just now Mahan said that when he documents, there's no it wasn't meant for an audience. It wasn't the idea of audience wasn't there. But in most of my work, when we are performing, me and my collaborators, the idea of the camera is there. And as much as we wanted it to be as comfortable as we want, whereby we always either there's an act in between us, whether we are sewing, we are talking, we are translating. But because there's a presence of the camera there, how we speak and our attire also changes. For example, I document a tea salad tutorial with the Burmese community. They changed their attire from how I used to know them. They dress up like more what represent a Burmese identity rather than how I see them in t-shirts in daily life. And I think when I saw this term camera as projector, I think it also certain identities also projected out through the camera as well, through the presence of the camera. Yeah. Mm.
Indeed, the camera itself is a very powerful thing, and pointing at somebody can either document it or even change that person. Morgan, what about you, Morgan?
I'm not sure if I have much to add really to what Mahen and Okwi have already sort of said. Cameras, projector. So is the idea that the camera doesn't just record things, it displays things? Is that what you're saying, Ghazi?
Yes.
Yeah, I mean, I guess that's I agree. But it's a funny state of affairs, really. I don't think so much in terms of like the global conditions of viewing or anything. I've always been interested in cultural production or cultural activity that could be identified as subcultural, rightly or wrongly. And I've never really been interested in people being interested in what I do beyond maybe a small community. So I've never, mostly the things that I'm doing are about trying to make myself feel more, fully present as a kind of human being, and to try to test myself and to push myself, and whether that's technically or emotionally. And then if I can show the results of that exercise to a dozen people who appreciate it, that's fine. And I feel like all of this other stuff that's happening, I feel that we spend maybe, or sometimes we spend a little bit too much time analyzing things as they're unfolding. Because alongside this development of new technologies, or this spread of new technologies, has come a spread of like unnecessary analysis. Of people analyzing materials, technologies as soon as they emerge. Or the one thing that happened recently is there's this new trend to call exhibitions landmark. This is a landmark exhibition when it's just come up. Like, how do you know? You can't, like, an institution cannot determine this. It has to be determined by other people. So, yeah, I'm not sure if that answers the question, Ghazi, but I feel a bit ambivalent about it, really.
Yeah, I understand that. And perhaps I was interested to know how was the process of making your film? Because was it random footages or?
Well, I must say, so I think you're talking about Another Decade, right?
Yes.
So yes. I must say that it was very clandestine, very undercover. Mm. Essentially, there's an institution in England called the International Institution of Visual Arts or something. And that the short version is INIVA. And I noticed that in the library, they had a drawer full of VHS tapes, and they also had a TV, and the TV was attached to a video player that had a DVD player thing too. And I realized that I could burn the videos to DVD. And INIVA was not doing anything with the material. And so I just went in every day to the library and I burnt DVDs. I had like a pile of 20 DVDs of all of this material and footage that was discussing the presence of people from the majority world in the West and positions from people from the majority world, critical positions in relation to their own host nations or nations of descent and the West, and also the idea that this was going to have to become a new global reality. And I felt that why should I, I knew what would happen if I tried to do it officially. They would say, you need this permission, you need that permission. They want to do certain things to the work. So I just went ahead and made it. And yeah, so that's what happened. It's a pirate film. It's a pirate film.
It's interesting to to understand the use of found footages in your film, and this brings me to my next point. With this easy accessibility, or even the word democratization of this medium, we can see a lot of moving images being integrated part of our life. Social media is one of it. Everybody is trying to showcase their life in social media. Trying to critique on this, how do you see this beneficial to the exploration of this medium? Because on one hand, I've always find it as finding, trying to find a needle in a haystack, trying to find something in a mess, in a big pile of content. But on the other thing, I felt that this is the content for the future too. It is like, a documentation where, artists in the future can use this, using this found footage to create a certain sense of critique. Perhaps Mahen would like to start the discussion.
Well, this is a really tricky one. I think you rightly mentioned that the history of the medium itself, it's only been 143 years or so. I don't think the function of the medium itself, of moving images, has changed all that much, right from the start, when it first appeared until today. I honestly see that the function has not changed that much, except I think this idea of individuals, both individuals, a community, and corporations having a sense of agency in projecting their own narrative, using this medium to project their own narrative, has always been there. One of the concerns that I actually have with this idea of medium of film and memory is that corporations and advertising have really played they've really played their hand in appropriating history in the medium of the moving images. And that, I think, has really shaped the way that people of a particular community or a particular society have shaped the way that they themselves think about themselves and the past. And so one example that I would give is that in Malaysia, we celebrate Independence Day, right? And that happens on 31st of August, 1957. And so much of what we know collectively, or how we imagine the celebration of Independence Day, is very much colored by the advertisements that have come out from corporations over the last many decades. And what Malaysians do on YouTube, on social media, is that we relive these experiences or these memories again and again. And so I think for many people, when back in the day when we watch these advertisements first appear on screen, we understand them as, yes, this is just an advertisement. It is paid by so and so, this company, right? But as the current generation rediscovers these moving images, they are perceived as reality. So all these scenes that were created by a bunch of individuals, drafted in the meeting room and then created lights, camera, action, all of these scenes that were reenacted and crafted and manipulated is now being looked at as reality. And so the young generation of Malaysians look back at these advertisements of Merdeka, Independence Day, and they feel that this is how life was back then. This is the truth. So at least in Malaysia, we don't there is no clear distinction between what is reality and what is fiction, especially when it comes to moving images.
I'd like to add in a little bit there. Do you think the, whatever we are facing right now with the stakeholders trying to create content, is there a shift in how we remember things or the context?
Also?
Like I think when we create advertisement, when we create new works, like you have mentioned, people in the meeting room have tried to create something based on their product or based on their things that they want to sell. And I often find there's always a possibility to alter history or alter a certain sense of culture, alter a certain sense of what have gone through the past. And I think that is very worrying for me because it then normalizes things for the youth. What is your take on that, since you have mentioned about that?
I think there is less of a tendency for corporations today to look back into the past. But I think what's more worrying today is that they are essentially manipulating the present by appropriating real issues, real social issues. So while documentarians may go out there and try to tell the real story, corporations have sort of taken over that role by employing documentarians to create commercial products. And so now, today, social issues become a platform for corporations to present themselves, their own agenda. And they position themselves as the saviors. Like, look at me, I'm very conscious about all these things that are happening, and look at what I'm doing. So I think there is a problem that Malaysian society, and I only speak about Malaysian society in this context, is that the way that we understand what is happening within Malaysia itself is very much colored by media that is coming out by corporations, whereas independent documentaries that are being produced have very limited audience, in a sense. So I think, like, at least for me, because I have been involved in this kind of projects, which I have, which I really cannot stand, I find it to be very problematic. But also sometimes you just have to say yes to these projects because you have to earn a living. I'll just say that.
Thank you, Mahend. I'd like to move to Morgan. Morgan, you've been playing with a lot of found footage, and I've always think that the content, like the question I've mentioned earlier, what we see right now, perhaps could be the content of the future or a critique of what the future can see of our generation. Perhaps you can comment on that?
Yeah, possibly, yeah. I think one of the things that spurred me on to do the film and make it in the way that I did make it was that, working with archives tends to be, in this country at least, it tends to only be available to people with a lot of money, because you have to pay lots and lots of money to have access. And so, I think that always produces a certain sort of film as well. They feel that, archival films tend to be a little bit, tend to lack a little bit of urgency and sort of contemporary relevant pertinence, maybe. Anyway, but what I think was interesting about what you're saying, Garcia, is like, in Another Decade, there's a section where a Japanese curator, I can't remember his name now, but says something to a conference in England about, it's a conference of internationalism, and he says that the conference is based on new internationalism, and he says, we can't just be thinking this is some great conference when everyone has to speak in English, and I, as a Japanese speaker, am still kind of at a disadvantage because it's not my main language, or we're not, my language isn't present here. And I thought it was interesting then when watching Okwi's film, and even when she was saying that someone had said to her, "Are you the same person in these different languages?" You know, it's a question if I've had partners whose language isn't English, I've often felt, not always, but sometimes you could have a partner who, when they speak their native language, you'll notice their body completely changes, or the way they intone things completely changes. And I think it's rare sometimes. Someone has to be probably bilingual for a very, very long time for it to remain sort of, well, in my experience, for them to be seem completely similar in both somehow. So I think what I'm thinking is that these concerns about language have obviously remained because they were discussed in one form in the conference, and then in Okwi's film they're discussed in another form, and we still haven't moved any closer towards like understanding each other beyond English, you know. So I don't know about alerting us to events of the past, but certainly I would hope that maybe sometimes they can alert us to things that still haven't been done. You know, like we still haven't addressed language. We've got the internet, we've got all of these facilities for learning, but for some reason we still don't know each other. You know, so I don't know. I'll just briefly say this because I don't want to talk for a long time, but I feel like, you know, one of the things that I think it has to be the future, has to be a way of understanding other people through how can I through their own eyes. You know, like, and how do you do that if you're always doing it from over the fence of your own language? I don't know if that makes sense. So I'm sorry if that's not making sense, but yeah.
No worries. I think you brought a good point on how similar your work with Okwi's work, and I definitely say about that. Perhaps Okwi would like to share about, you know, the current state of social media contents being developed, especially when your work is, you have a very, there's something that you would like to say. There's a, you know, and I personally feel that it's very important in Malaysia context nowadays, the idea of this language, you know, rootedness with your own language. Perhaps you want to comment on that. Yeah.
I was just, when Morgan was sharing just now, I was thinking, I shared the work with students around 18 years old. They told me they were very impatient with my work because why do I need to repeat it 4 times? and the student told me that you could maybe put 4 subtitles when you're talking, or maybe you can just, so for them, I could know is something quite common they see on YouTube, because you can see musicians playing folk, like even some YouTube channel, they are talking, split personality talking with themselves, or like the fall of musician playing different instruments, but it's the same musician. And so when they say that, I was also thinking, yeah, is that the form itself is something familiar for them. A same person presented in multiple screen is something more than common for them. The content, the language, I think it might also, because as English is getting more dominant right now, a lot of younger generation now only speak maybe only one language, even of regardless of which descendants. I think I was also, there was one question that you gave to us about future. I was also thinking maybe this work might be, the future generation cannot even relate. Why does this person need to talk to herself 4 times? So when I was thinking about the future, I was thinking, is something maybe um, um, something like they can't relate perhaps in the future. But for me myself, I was thinking, I had that experience when I went to Japan. They have interpretation, the simultaneous interpretation, where we wear headphones, and then you switch to channel 1 is English, switch to channel 2 is Japanese. So I was thinking, oh, actually in Malaysia, maybe we should always wear this. And it is even in the multicultural context, even in conference, we although we brand multicultural, Malaysia as a multicultural country, but it usually falls back to either Malay or English or even Chinese at a specific occasion, depending on the occasion. So yeah, maybe in the future everyone is wearing that thing. Yeah.
Yeah, it's some sort like a dictionary auto-translate.
Yeah.
Yeah, and I have to admit that while watching your work, the first few sentences that are from a different language, I was trying to find the CC button, the capture button, and only to realize that it was being repeated in different language. And I must say I really enjoyed the whole thing. In fact, I didn't want it to end at the 16 minutes.
I was also thinking, sorry.
Yeah. Sorry. After you.
I was also thinking about, we are talking about TikTok and other things, and Mahan was talking about the scrubbing through like ×2 speed. I'm thinking whether if like the future, they will be, things will be so fast, whether the duration will be even shorter, the length for the feature film might be even shorter. There's a lot of like, even a lot of, how to say, the drama, online drama series is getting shorter sometimes, the duration of it, rather than 1 whole hour. It's getting like 30 minutes or 25 minutes, mini series. Yeah. So, yeah.
I totally agree with you, because every time I show a film to my students, and the first question they will ask is not even the title. The first question they ask will be, how long is the film? And I think that's disturbing to me, because I think they're not able to sit in one sitting or to absorb this whole thing that the filmmaker is trying to tell. And this all relates back to the idea of this is becoming the norm. What has been normalized, what is moving images have to be. And I think all the three of you, your works have been challenging this. And I think, although that some of you guys have mentioned that you have never thought about the audience while making this, but how do you see this medium of moving image as a catalyst to disrupt order in audience life? Or perhaps also disrupt order in what moving images had become right now? Maybe, but Mahan, you would like to start?
I think I just suddenly thought of this, a comment that I received recently when one of my documentaries was being shown in an art gallery. And it was rather interesting that this person just mentioned that your documentary is the only chance that we would ever be able to hear the voices of these people within this setting, within this art gallery. And these are like the documentary that I'm talking about, the one about the Malayan mansion, Selangor mansion, where I interview people on the street, people who have been living in that environment for the longest time, and we understand that space and how they function within that space through their own voices. And so when all of my documentaries, I don't include any voiceover. I don't really include archival footage. I don't use infographics, nothing. Everything is narrated through their own voice. So I think in some way, the fact that the film itself offers insights into spaces that people generally do not function within, that itself is disruptive in a way. Language is another thing. I just wanted to respond to what Morgan and Oke brought up about languages, and I was just wondering, or rather, I would actually argue that the future of the Malaysian language is actually a mix of many different languages and corruption of many different words coming in from external words coming in, and I think we as Malaysians, we don't necessarily think of languages as having their own distinct order, but really everything is sort of jumbled up. At least for myself, when I watched Oke's film, I felt like I could just understand it natively when she was switching languages. I'm like, okay, yeah, sure, okay, I understand this. And I could note the differences and like, so in this language you're expressing it, the tone is slightly different, this is different, it's different. But then another person might view it and feel that they really need subtitles for everything. And an extension of that, I was just wondering whether is there space for Malaysians to really adopt that organic development of language and have our own language and be proud of it in a sense, in the same way that the Japanese are able to basically just hold on to their own Japanese language and translate it for other people to understand. So I don't know if in the future that will ever happen, but I on one hand, I feel really proud when I'm able to just speak in my own local Malaysian English rather than speaking a proper version of English so that everyone may understand. Yeah.
Cool. Maybe Oke would like to add on it?
Yeah, nothing to add much. Although it's in 4 different languages, each of it is quite mixed up. I use a lot of terms mixing up with each other, especially my family language. I cannot say it in Hokkien, so it has its own order itself, even in it's separate in the 4 channel.
Okay, but maybe you can answer, how do you see the medium as a catalyst to disrupt whatever is happening right now?
And I will need a moment for this.
If you can move to Morgan, maybe. Yeah.
Could you just rephrase say the question again, please, Ghazi?
How do you see, as things are normalized of what moving images can give, how do you see your work and in this medium as a catalyst to disrupt, either the order of the audience daily life or even the workflow of moving images?
So again, I think it's just because I have quite a coming from maybe a subcultural perspective. What I'm doing, I don't anticipate that it will have any connection to kind of wider order of things. And the people who see what it is that I'm producing are already, let's say, fluent in the language that I'm using. And it's strange. I sometimes feel like the pressures or this question of like wider audiences tends to be brought to the table for artists in a way that it never is for anyone else. Like let's say a sports person, if someone played cricket, they would never say to them, how are you gonna, you're thinking about cricket, but how will it impact on the way you're bowling have on like baseball, for example? How will those, in the future? But here we are discussing, in some ways, our field in relation to another field that has nothing to do with it other than they both use moving image. Like baseball and cricket have nothing really to do with each other other than their sports. So when I see things like TikTok or any of these other, I mean, they're completely sort of uninspiring to me. You know, I have absolutely no interest in them. That's not a value judgment for other people who use them. Great, go for it. But maybe also because I have a bit of an old school connection to maybe anti-capitalist, non sort of corporate approaches to things. And, you know, these organized facilities like TikTok have, you know, have a corporate providence. They come, someone's making a profit from all of these things that are helping audiences to express themselves. You know, there's someone making money, and it's the same with Facebook, it's the same with Twitter, it's the same with Instagram. So I always view these facilities, radical facilities for expressing contemporary identity, are a bit of a joke, really, and it's just another way to make money. So, you know, yes, we're all connected to capitalism. Yes, I know that. But, you know, you can make choices about how complicit you may be in a certain situation. And so I've always felt like, obviously, those choices are relative to geographical location and economic situation. But for me, I'm lucky enough to be able to say, I don't want anything to do with TikTok or Facebook or Twitter or Instagram, and they won't impact me, you know, or I can try to not buy things from Amazon. I can try, you know, I have that sort of privilege. And again, I think, yeah, I don't see myself as resisting what's happening because I'm not really interested in it. And if people, like, for example, when Okri was saying, she showed the film and these students were saying, well, why don't you do this? Why don't you do that? I mean, I've had moments like that myself, but I sort of, to me, they're not so interesting because, again, it's like showing someone a game of chess and they're like, well, why don't you just put the king at the end? Why do you have to do all these other moves? I don't, why, you know, why can't we just hop this way? And you're like, well, that's not what it is. Yeah.
Hi, Ghazi, I think you're muted.
Okay, so sorry. Sorry about that. I think let's move on to, thank you for the answer, and let's move on to a question where I find hopefully can sum this up. How do you see the future of moving images? And in correlation to your work, how do you see it can be, you know, the future, if you can share any possible future presentation or exhibition that can be challenged in different ways? How do you see the future of this medium, moving images?
Do you want us to each answer that in like a couple of sentences? Because I think we don't have much time left. What do you
Sure.
Should we do that?
Yeah.
Okay, maybe I'll just start because I'm talking. So I can't speak for the field itself, but for me as a filmmaker, I think the future is going to be like, what's the balance between do I try to keep what I do or do I let it just go? And also the footprint of what it is that I'm doing, the data, the storage, what, you know, there's, I feel like in relation to something like sculpture, it doesn't seem to have such an impact on the environment. But then again, all the technological equipment needed to store and display my work, that comes through a history of like natural resource extraction. So I guess maybe at some point these questions are going to become quite difficult for me, and they could end up with me having to not make film. So I think the future is like maybe something to do with that for me.
Okay. Okay, or Maher?
I think the future, it can be very small and big. I mean, in the sense of the presentation of the work, so small our phone, or maybe in the future the phone is even smaller, so big that now that projectors are so affordable that people can just put in their house and then host their own screening. But I think the question of whether this moving images stays, and if it stay, how long does it stays? I think that's the challenge, because things are moving so fast, regardless of what the duration is. How could it stays? And for me, I think now and also future is a negotiation between myself, because I'm also the audience, and my collaborators are also the audience, in terms of moving images as the bigger moving images around us. So these languages will what they consume, and when we are working together with me and my partners, it will also I will also negotiate around it. So I think that's where the shifting identities in myself happens.
Cool. Perhaps Mahen, your point?
I think technological advances will continue to change the way films are, moving images are being made, are being manufactured, and how they're also being consumed. I think personally for me, as I continue creating works, I'm sort of moving away from worrying too much about how about technological trends and what's happening, but rather just trying to just focus on just creating more works and having that discipline to just go there and just do what is it that I set out to do. For some reason, it's becoming increasingly hard for me to do that. And so moving forward, I think that's what I'm trying to do, at least. I think there will always be this idea of an audience and moving images on the screen. That will always be there.
Thank you so much, and to our audience and also to our speakers for sharing your point of view. I think we've come to our end of this discussion, and as what Mahen have mentioned, technology will constantly evolve, and we will see many forms of coming out from it, whether it's big screens, small screens. I think only we can see it through time. I also like to point out that you can catch Morgan's work another decade, and also Okilala's national language class, our language proficiency, as part of this showcase curated by Roopesh. And I hope all the audience have learned something from the speakers, and like myself, I think I've learned a lot. And thank you so much for tuning in. Thank you.